Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this tutorial I'll be sharing with you a requested video on how to cut this asymmetric overbust inbuilt corset dress. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. Drafting our pattern. So I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waistline, and 5 inches to get my top length. So after that, I'm going to go ahead to mark the shoulder divided by 2, and I'll add ½ inch to it because I'm attaching a sleeve. I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll go ahead to connect. Place my tape and I'll mark my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I will go ahead to mark. Place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line. So I'll go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, or your bust span divided by 2, which is, mine is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. And now I'll place my ruler and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line at those points. So I'll go ahead and mark a dart intake of 1 inch on both sides of my pattern. If you're a plus size, you're going to be using 1.5 inches. So I'm drawing a straight dart because it's easier for a beginner to work with a straight dart. And I'll place my ruler, connect it to my under bust, and I will connect this way. So this is what I have. I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline my pattern. So I'll be coming up by 1.5 inches and I'll go ahead to mark and draw a straight line at that point. Now I'll mark my nipple to nipple back at that line and I'll extend it all up. Now you can decide to use 2 inches if you don't want to reveal your cleavage, and I'll go ahead to mark back my dart intake of 1 inch on both sides and I'll go ahead to connect it back to the upper part of my pattern, and I'll go ahead to connect, and I'll use my marker to mark this out to make it more visible for you to see. After I'm done doing this, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to insert my body measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance, and I'll go ahead and mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. At the waist, I'm going to go ahead to mark the waist circumference, add the dart intake and add my sewing allowance. At the hip, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake and add my sewing allowance. So now you can also decide to snatch your waist. So I didn't use exactly my waist measurement. My waist is 28. I took out 2 inches from it, making it 26. So I divided that 26 by 4 and I marked on my waistline. Now I'm going to be marking my dart intake here of 1.5. that is my bust dart. So now the bust dart is the difference between your front measurement and your back measurement. So if you place your tape and measure your dress from the front and the back, you notice that there's no bust at the back and the back is shorter. That is, your shoulder to waistline at the back is shorter than the front. So I'll go ahead to trace out this pattern, and I'm going to be marking what I have on this side on the other part of my pattern also. But before that, I'll just go ahead and divide my armhole into 2, mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead to come in by ½ inch and connect and draw my armhole. So I actually forgot to do this part when I was cutting out or marking out this pattern. So I'll just go ahead and transfer all these measurements on the other side. Now before going ahead to work on my pattern, I'll just go ahead to blend in my bust dart before I'll continue altering the pattern, and I'll use my pin to hold it down. From the shoulder, I came in by 2 inches. You can also use 2.5 inches if you feel the shoulder will be too small. And from that point, I'll just extend it all the way down. And I'm going to repeat the same process at the other side of the pattern, mark 2 inches and extend it all the way down. Next, I'm going to go ahead to draw out the neckline and connect. Then I'll be drawing out a sweetheart neckline at the center part. So I'll just go ahead and extend it all the way to the chest line and go down a bit and just connect to the other side of my pattern. Now remember, we have a dart intake we took on top. I'll just go ahead and extend my armhole a bit to complete that intake we took at the upper part of this pattern. I'll also repeat this at the other side of my pattern also. So from the chest line, I'll come down a bit and I'm going to be connecting this to the other side of my pattern, and whatever you do here, you're also going to repeat it at the other side also this way. So now I'll go ahead and extend this to the chest line at this part, go up a bit, and I'm also going to extend this at the other side. So I'll go ahead and I'll outline the neckline of my pattern this way, and also outline the other side of my pattern too. So after I'm done outlining this, I'll just come down at the other side of my pattern too, and I will also outline it. Now I'll place my tape and I'll measure about 2 inches from there, and I'm going to connect it, come down by 2 inches from the center also, and go up this way. Now I'll also measure that same 2 inches here and I will connect. So this is what I have at this point. I'll place my tape by the side at the center. I'll mark ½ inch and mark ½ inch at the other side, or you can mark 0.75 inches. Now I'll go ahead to blend in my dart, and from my waistline I will come up and connect to that point. So while drawing this out, you also want to blend in your dart to make sure that it meets very well and you're going to connect. So this is what I have at this point. And at the lower part of my pattern, I'm just going to go ahead to come up by 2 inches, and I'll come up by 2 inches at this side. Now I'll blend it in, place my ruler, and I'll connect. So I'll be cutting that part of my pattern up off, and after I'm done cutting it, we're going to continue adjusting our pattern. So I'll just come down a bit by ½ inch after my waistline, and I will be blending in this dart line in, and I'll go ahead to connect this all the way, and also blend this and connect this from this side to the other side of my pattern. So I'll just go ahead and use my marker and I will outline this. So you're also going to number your pattern so that when you're joining it, you not get confused. Now I'll place another pattern underneath this, and we are going to trace out the upper part because this is an overbust corset. So there's a bustier sitting underneath this pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead to trace this out. So if you have any question regarding this, please also leave the question at the comment section, and I'm just going to go ahead to trace this out. After I'm done tracing this out, I'll fold over the underbust part and I will trace this out. So just like I said, there's a bustier sitting underneath this pattern. So I'll just go ahead and cut this out first, so that I will go ahead to cut out the bustier underneath it, and I'll cut this out and also cut the other side. So now I'm just going to go ahead to trace out that upper part because you will not be needing it again. That is the first initial upper part of this pattern. So after you're done sewing the lower part of the corset, you're going to be attaching that on that bustier underneath it. So you're just going to go ahead to label your pattern because you're going to be cutting it out and you're going to be joining it. So I'll cut out the upper part first. So while I was cutting out my pattern, I didn't know that my camera wasn't recording, but I will be explaining how to join this pattern because I went ahead to cut it all out. All those lines that we marked, you're going to cut it out. So now to join this pattern, I also noticed that I didn't label this, so I just had to go ahead to label it also. So to join your pattern, you're going to go ahead to take these two and join it together. So this is the part that you have this illusion net on that has boning channel on it, and the other side of it also that has that boning channel on it. So this part is the center piece, and you're also going to join it together as one piece. That is the one that runs from the middle to the lower part of the waistline. Now you're also going to join this together as one piece. So you can go ahead to merge this up and cut it as one piece without joining it, and then you will now join it back to the upper piece, and then you now take this side and join it together. Now the next part you'll be joining to it is the part going towards the bust part, that is the overbust area of this pattern. So after that, you're just going to go ahead to join the upper part together, and now you're going to sew your bustier. And after you're done joining the lower part, you're just going to join your bustier, the lining, the main fabric, and you're going to join it and top stitch it, or stitch it by the side and attach to the lower part. Now, to get this slanted effect on the waistline, you're just going to sew your skirt. After you're done sewing, you're going to put on your skirt, and then you're going to cut out the slanted waistline and then add it back to your corset and join it back to your dress like an inbuilt corset. So now this is the back pattern. So I didn't get a clear video of how the back looks like, and I'm just going to go ahead to draw out a basic back bodice. So when I was marking this out, so remember we took out a bust dart from the front pattern, so the front short back pattern is actually shorter by 1.5 inches. So after this, I'll just go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So when I was marking the armhole of the back, I made a mistake. I forgot to mark my chest line and I connected it to my bust. So I'll go ahead also to correct that. But before that, I'll just go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and I'll be marking my dart intake of 1/2 inch and also take it all the way down. So after that, I'll just go ahead and mark and extend my darts all the way up. So when I was extending my darts, that was when I noticed that, and I had to go ahead to mark my chest line area. So I placed my ruler and I ruled out my chest line at that point, and reconnected it. And I also went back to mark my dart intake. After that, I just went ahead to use my marker to mark this out. So I'll go ahead, mark my bust circumference divided by 4, add my sewing allowance, use the waist measurement we used for the front, mark it, add back my dart intake and add my sewing allowance, mark my hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, mark and add my sewing allowance. Now I'll just go ahead to connect my pattern all the way up to the lower part of this dress, and I'll be coming in by 1.5 inches. This is not a standard. You can use any lacing bar measurement of your choice, like any measurement you want to use at your lacing bar area. So I'll just go ahead, come down by 1/2 inch, and I will connect, come up by 2 inches here, and I will go ahead to connect it all the way to the lower part of my pattern. And after I'm done doing that, I'll just make a mark to indicate that I have a lacing bar, and I'll be outlining the rest of my pattern. Now for the upper part, I'll still mark that same 2 inches and go ahead to take it all the way down to the lower part of my pattern, and I'll mark 0.25 inches here so that the yoke of the dress won't be falling off. Or when you're joining your shoulder, instead of using 1/2 inch, you might use 0.75 or just use 1 inch. This will reduce the shoulder and tighten it at the shoulder area. So after cutting the back pattern, with this we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to leave your question at the comment section. Thanks.